Welcome to Strata. I'm Glenn.
And I'm Brandon. Welcome to the Minds on Muscle podcast. Hey everyone, this is another episode of the Minds on Muscle podcast. My name is Brandon and I'm here with...
My name is Glenn.
And today we're talking about a grip for every trip. And I think this is a really important conversation because grips and the things we're grabbing in the gym, we're pushing into, we're pulling into are things that are not often discussed and ultimately will determine how successful your results are with exercise.
Yeah, the only time I really hear anybody talk about grip is if people are talking about athletes. Specifically, if holding their implement is of vast importance. And even with that in mind, I can't think of too many sports where your grip strength is something that's going to be extremely limiting to you such that you have to train it. Or if the grip strength is limiting you from doing things like hip hinge exercises, deadlifts, so to speak, that's really the only time I hear people talk about grip. And there's so many other places where grip becomes of utmost importance and how it can either enhance or limit an exercise that we're doing.
Yeah, so I think like things like jiu-jitsu and other endurance sports, we're using a lot of hands and you're holding on to things. I mean, you got to work on grip strength. You got to be able to hold on. But there are performance athletes and coaches that I've met over the years who will talk about things like deadlifts, and they will not use straps at all, which I think is a great conversation topic. And they'll say, if you can't hold on to it with your bare hands, you can't actually deadlift the weight. And that just drives me nuts because we've got a couple things that come into play. You have a bar that has a predetermined size. Most barbells are the same size in most commercial gyms. And if you've got someone with larger hands versus smaller hands, their ability to hold onto the bar is going to be vastly different. So if you've got someone like myself, who I can deadlift over 400 pounds, but I can't hold on to the 445 that I can deadlift. So does that mean that I can't deadlift it? Well, if I keep working on grabbing the bar and trying to pick up 405, and my grip is the thing that lets go, I'm not training my deadlift at all. I'm just training grip strength, which is fine. But if that's the case, is there a more effective way to train grip strength? And maybe you can use straps so you can actually do the deadlifts. I don't know.
Yes. I mean, when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, what's the end goal ultimately? And I think that's kind of what you're saying is our end goal to increase our deadlift? Like, is that our goal, just to have bigger numbers in the gym? And if your grip is limiting you, yeah, you have to figure out some kind of strategy or program and plan your training such that you improve that. But if the goal is to have more muscle, is just trying to work the deadlift for your grip the best way? Probably not.
I mean, ultimately it would be a big waste of energy because if you think of something like a deadlift, and I'm picking that because that's a very popular and common example, everyone says you should deadlift, right? It's this panacea super adaptation exercise, which is not entirely true. But if you keep saying you're going to have to do that exercise and your grip is the thing that's letting go, that is a huge many joint exercise that you're wasting a lot of energy on for so many different reasons. And if your hand's the thing that's letting go, you're never really going to get any amazing adaptation from that exercise except for grip strength. So why don't you just work on grip strength? I don't know. But the idea that grip is the thing that will determine if you can or can't do a weight, in most coaches' eyes, I just don't think it's a fair place to start.
And this is the whole conversation about grip being a big limiter is, I feel like one of the only times we talk about a joint being a limiting factor in a movement. I don't really hear too many people talk about, oh, your anterior delts aren't strong enough, your bench press isn't going to go up, or your lats aren't strong enough, so you're not going to be able to increase your pull-ups. People are just like, I'm just going to keep rocking the pull-up or keep doing my rows, and eventually I'll get there. Grip is just, it seems to be that thing where, because so many of the exercises that we do rely on us holding things, it needs to be talked about. And especially that, for the fact that we work with some more sensitive populations, and oftentimes gripping is something that causes people pain or discomfort, or in some cases they have osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis or some kind of a disease that prevents them from actually holding anything with any degree of comfort. And then you got to find a solution of that as a part of their exercise experience.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, so the challenge that we have, if we just come back to hand size and hand geometry, we have so many different folks that have different hand sizes. And when I say even geometry, you have people who have longer fingers and longer metatarsals. So it gets weird because you could have two people with the same length of hand, but the geometry could be such that someone has much longer metatarsals or longer fingers, both of which are going to change someone's ability to grip onto something, which is interesting, but it's not really something that's explored. If you talk to most personal trainers and you say, hey, have you assessed somebody's grip, grip range of motion, grip strength. Have you thought about why you're using that bar versus a narrower bar versus a wider bar? It's not something that's usually on the radar. And I think that's something that we could definitely start to consider.
Yeah, I think most people in general, their default is if the bar is too heavy, well, I'm just going to keep doing this thing. And very seldomly do people thinking about changing their grip. I mean, there are some gyms where they have thinner bars.
Right.
And I know as a guy growing up working out at some of these gyms, it was almost frowned upon if you were to use the bar with the smaller diameter, because people looking at being like, why are you using the woman's bar? I'm like, it's not really like a woman's bar per se. It's really only a woman's bar in the sport of Olympic weightlifting. And how many people in this gym are actually training for Olympic weightlifting? Zero. Right. And we could be improving the deadlift, the RDL, the anything, the bent over barbell rows that someone could be doing for their back if we were to switch from that thicker bar to that narrow one. I mean, that 1.5 inch difference to that 1 inch goes a long way in terms of your ability to wrap your hands around there, to have the optimal length tension relationship at some of these joints, such that you might be able to improve your grip strength 10, 20, 30 fold just by changing the width of that bar.
It's a super simple thing, but honestly, it's not something that's brought up because most manufacturers of barbells are people who they're creating barbells for power lifters, CrossFit, and this very specific world. Therefore, that world is accustomed to a very specific size barbell. So we have this thing where we're using this hand, this complex joint system, and we're manipulating its position to fit one system. And I think it brings up, like, we could kind of go lateral here. Glenn and I have talked about strength curves within muscles, right? So as you get to the end range of a position, like approximation, for example, if I come all the way in and I get to the end of a 2-joint muscle's ability to shorten, the ability for that muscle to produce force decreases. Well, in most cases, when we're grabbing something, like if we grab a fully pronated grip and close our fingers on a bench or something like a chin up where our palms are facing away, when our fingers are closed, we're at the very shortened end of many 2 or multi-joint muscles. So their ability to manage force decreases dramatically. So if you're strong enough to hold on to do a chin up or a bench press, maybe not a bench press because grip strength is not usually a thing, but a chin up, that's fantastic. But what if you're not? This brings up a great conversation, because if you have someone who's not strong enough, smaller hands, just like Glenn said, why don't we introduce straps so we can actually get the adaptation that we want at a specific joint system, like our upper back?
Yeah. Or, I mean, there are other examples I think we're going to talk about later. There are some companies that make specialized grips that really optimize the strength of the hand musculature and the wrist musculature such that you can improve the lifts that you're going after if you're using these handles.
I love them. I mean, Prime, we've talked about it a lot, but Prime makes some really cool grips. We've got the rotate handle and the cast handle, which we're going to touch on in a few minutes. I love them. They're both completely different, and both are great for specific things and terrible for other things. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the nice thing about this is if we start considering hand ergonomics, being able to find implements that fit our hand specific for a specific exercise and let us get the most out of it, but still engage our hand in hand strength and hand stability. I mean, that's the perfect combination because you're getting all the benefits, but not fatiguing or breaking at any one point. Yeah,
you always have to be looking at like what's the goal of your exercise and what's going to be the rate limiting thing that's going to allow you to get the most out of that exercise. So, it drives me bananas when I see people with those blue fat grips. You see those blue fat grips, you put them around a regular size dumbbell handle, and then they start trying to do deadlifts and whatnot. They're like, I'm trying to improve my deadlift, trying to improve my grip for my deadlift.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, like, listen, I get it. That's one way to do it. But are you willing to blow all the other nervous system energy that you have, all the other stored glucose that you have for this physical activity on doing the deadlift? Like, I mean, even doing sets of 10 for a deadlift, which is probably what you need to be doing to hold that, to get enough stimulus to your grip, right, on the deadlift when you're doing it. I'm not sure if that made sense or not. You need to be holding on to those for a certain amount of time. And do you want to keep holding on to 225 pounds or 135 pounds or 405 pounds, whatever you're doing for sets of 10, blowing out the rest of your system for the rest of your workout just to improve your grip strength? To me, it's cuckoo bananas.
I think, honestly, I completely agree that working on your grip strength is actually really simple. I mean, honestly, what we used to talk about at Persicini's was go down the rack. right? If you have access to a dumbbell rack, you do a couple things. Find a weight and try to hold on to 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 50 pounds. Watch the timer and try to literally just hold on to dumbbells for as long as you can and see how long. Can I hold the 50 pounds for 60 seconds? Great. Can I hold the 60 pounds for 60 seconds? Can I hold it for longer? Ultimately, it comes down to, why do you need that grip strength? Because do you need more strength so you can hold on to a deadlift bar because you are in the NFL Columbine and you need to deadlift, or baseball and you need to do it for a specific period of time? Or is it for rock climbing, where you need to be able to hang off of your body weight for minutes, tens of minutes, hours, depending on what you're doing? It's very different, but what are you working on it for? And then if it's just for the length of time, the simplest thing you can do before we get into hand ergonomics, talking about the mechanics, try to grab the 100-pound dumbbells, hold on to them. Getting tired, put it down. Grab the 80s, hold on to it. Grab the 60s, hold on to it. 40, 20, and you'll find, if you do that once or twice, you're done. And the ability, your hands will be so exhausted. And it's such a simple thing, but all of the energy is put into holding on to that dumbbell or holding on to that weight. And I bet if you do that, you'll identify one hand being a little bit stronger than the other.
Yeah, and I think that method also saves a lot of your nervous system energy. You're not having to run around or walk around. That's one of the things that always puzzled me. And I've used it a couple of times before with my clients, but having people hold the weights and walk around. I don't know why you have to walk around if you're trying to work on your grip strength. Like I get that it's going to present more of a full body challenge because you're trying to walk and manage all these different joints. If you're ever trying to manage all these different joints, ultimately you're going to be focusing less on the joints which you're trying to work, which are going to be these hand and wrist joints.
You know what? I 100% agree. But the only where I would slightly disagree anecdotally is from the whole motor performance thing we talked about. Because I mechanically, thinking about what you just said rationally, 100% agree. And I've said that to a lot of people. However, there's that whole thing we've talked about in motor learning, that if you're focused on an external task, your aggregate performance will be better, right? So if you're standing there and you're holding on to that weight and your hands start to get tired and burny and achy, it's really hard to not be focused on that achy, burning thing because you're so focused on it. I think doing something like a farmer's walk may not necessarily be deliberately more effective, but I could see how, I should say anecdotally, because I have a pair of 75-pound dumbbells I keep out in the shed at our house, and I'll go in our backyard in the summer and I'll walk with them across the backyard. And it's more just to distract myself from the holding on sensation. So my external performance, so to speak, using Tom Purvis's RTS language, is focused on walking, and the holding on to it is kind of like a afterthought, even though it's grueling. So it's almost distracting. But I don't know if that's more effective. I feel like it's more effective because everything you said sounds like it makes, I don't know. But it's just an interesting, I do think though, when you're in a gym and you're carrying weights, like you're saying, and you're walking and it starts to fall to your hands and it's like you're lumbering all over the place, that's a different story. I think that gets risky.
Do you think that might be the exception to the rule? Because when I work with my clients, like once in a while, there's some chatter during sets, but for the most part, I want them focusing on the exercise, right? The internal performance of the exercise, not like the external, like talking to me and distracting themselves from working out. That kind of falls in the same vein, does it not?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I think, and we've talked actually, I've been chatting with Cassim Hansen, Ben One Education, a little bit about intention. You actually sent me a video, which I want to talk more about that still, the extension and external rotation thing, but talking about how creating an internal co-contraction, like by flexing your tricep when you're doing a bicep curl to maintain stability, potentially could, and I would say decreases performance of the bicep curl because of how many variables are going on the inside. Where if you're doing just a bicep curl and you're thinking bring dumbbell up, although it may not be optimal, or it may be based off of how you're performing it, I think you'll get more overall performance via achieve the task when you're not necessarily distracted by the sensation so much in some cases. Like you're not so internally focused, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there are more people now doing more research on like what are the effects of intentionally. Like, do I get more hypertrophy if I'm thinking about squeezing my bicep the entire time, or do I get more hypertrophy if I'm not going through the motion, so to speak, but if I'm just trying to get the weight up there and then control it back down, get the weight up there and control it back down.
This is totally a different conversation, but where someone's mind gets involved and decreases performance and their ability to get the most out of themselves, I think is a really big thing. I've been reading, I think it's Evan Pycon, I was recommended to check out, who is an energy system guy. He does a lot of energy system research within CrossFit and uses Moxie sensors and many others. He's really brilliant. I don't understand it enough. But one of the preliminary assessments he does with high-level CrossFit athletes is trying to identify if someone's getting weaker in a specific area? Is it the muscles? Is it the lungs' ability to intake oxygen? Is it the heart? And is it ability for all those systems to work together and get oxygen and many other nutrients around the muscles? And if all of those things based off their metrics look good and someone's performance decreases, they can correlate that in most cases to a mindset thing or how someone's thinking about something. Because the number of times that someone's performance, not all the time, but their performance decreases, but their ability to, their muscles, oxygen level, and their muscle saturation, everything is solid. Their lungs are good. Their heart rate's in a good spot, but their performance decreases. They can go, okay, there must be something going on here that's decreasing performance that's on a conscious or subconscious level that's not mechanical. So I think it's in the same realm, but I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. It's a lot.
Well, for the sake of this conversation, all that in mind, if you are focusing and doing stuff for your grip, because it's relatively small amount of muscle compared to the rest of your body, those other things like saturation of the muscles, are you getting enough oxygen in, are you be able to get all the carbon dioxide out? Those are probably going to be almost non sequiturs to how your grip strength is working, right? I mean, we're looking at almost just here, like it's a lot more, I think, clear cut when it's a grip issue rather than a full body performance issue. So if you're at home listening, be like, oh, maybe my issue is, glucose or saturation of the oxygen in my body. That's where my grip strength is going. Probably not. It's probably the grip or the exercise that you're doing, or perhaps the implement that you're using, or you just don't have enough endurance in those muscles for the task at hand.
Yeah, there's a very, very small chance it could be, but very, 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 very small.
Tiny.
On that note, I mean, going back to the external performance focus thing to work on grip strength, I think this is where looking at a clock on a stationary example, not wasting energy with the walking thing, is an easy thing, because you can keep your eyes on the clock, have an external focus being the time, and you keep holding on to it. But if you're just standing there and you're just focused on how does it feel, I think things can kind of get a little wavery.
100% agree with you on that one.
Now, a grip for every trip. So we got a lot of different grip options here, and I've seen a lot of different grips in many different gyms over the years. I think we've got 5 different grips here. I can think of 4 off the top of my head very well. But I mean, a standard grip, right? We've kind of already touched on that a standard grip has I think it's 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches diameter, and it's demanding for some people, but not too bad for others. But there are sneaky ways to get assists. Like we've got here a pair of straps that I got from a Bowflex order, and it's got the same size handle, but it's got this nifty strap that goes over the back that adds an additional layer of support. Have you tried those ones?
I have not.
Oh, we're going to try them right after this.
Faux pas.
Yeah, no, they're really cool because what they do is it takes away the grip strength conversation a little bit. You still have to use your hand, but it adds that strap across the back so you get a little bit of extra support by the resistance pulling into the back of the hand, just a little, but just enough that you get that extra support. You're still using your hand strength, but in some cases may be able to not just rely on your fingers, maybe able to push through the back of your hand when you're doing exercises like lateral raises and others. I think it's a pretty nifty, sneaky little strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many different strategies that we could use to overcome the grip strength. Now, we also had a study group here that you led, and you're talking about rotate handles. Now, I might not do the best job. I could give it a shot, but I think you do a really great job explaining why the rotate handles from Prime Fitness are so great. And I would love if you share that with people right now.
So I'm a huge fan of the Prime Rotate handle. There's a few things that are really neat about them. First, they are tapered in, and they're tapered in with a geometry that is really favorable, especially if you've got normal size metatarsals, that you can put a lot more surface area of your palm and your metatarsals through that. So in most cases, if you have a relatively normative hand size, you got a lot of surface area from your palm and your fingers curl over top. So you can actually have all the surface area in your hand. So it actually moves the force vector a little bit closer to where your wrist joint is or the axis is in the plane of that exercise if you're doing a pulling exercise. So that's is really, really neat. In that case, since you have more surface area and it's a little bit closer to the wrist joint, you can actually use the same amount of forearm muscles, but there's less torque. So you can actually kind of like almost yank through it, which is really nice. Now, I have seen a few people who have smaller hand sizes and they have a harder time with it because it's a very specific size, coming back to the previous conversation, but it's this really nice tapered angle in. And it gives you a lot of surface area to kind of pull through. I'm a huge fan of them. I think they feel Really great. We actually did a whole study group, as Glenn just said, on them, talking about them and how changes in hand geometry, metatarsal size, finger length, all come into play. In fact, one of the participants in the study group has shorter metatarsals and longer fingers. So she technically has almost maybe the same size hand as me, but because the geometry of her hand was a bit different, she had a heck of a time using it. Her fingers kept sliding off of it and found a regular grip size to be much more advantageous. But for yanking and pulling things, it's great. I definitely noticed on some of the machines here, I've removed the traditional handles like our Nautilus Nitro Row and the pull down and put the rotate handles on them. And I can hold on to way more weight with it because I have more surface area. I'm relying less on my hand, and I should say the back of my hand. And what's kind of neat is when you grab something and create a fist, especially if you're grabbing like a suitcase, your hand actually has to go back into extension a little bit. And you can see this in the Kapanji hand manuals really well. When you go back into extension, you do have extensors of the hand that are involved to create a co-contraction when you're grabbing something. And they're a part of grip strength, but they're not the strongest, and they are more faster twitch dominant, so they can tire faster. So what's cool about the rotate is it actually bends things in a little bit. So it's all just the larger flexor muscles, and you get a little bit less of the co-contraction variable of the extensor. So ultimately, from a muscular perspective, surface area structure in most cases, and moving the joint axis mechanics physics, it makes it kind of a really cool, nifty way to be stronger at yanking stuff. I like it.
It's funny because when I first saw them, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And then you try them. I think I have normal hands. I'm 5'9", and they seem normal to me at least. The feel of the exercise is that much better. And you really do, for pulling exercises, even if you have a bit of an issue with the grip, you really do feel like you get more out of it because you do not feel the burn and the fatigue building up in the forearms and the hands close to the amount that you would if you were doing them with the regular grips. And it's fascinating to me. And again, that's just my experience. And for some people, they're not going to be great handles, especially with those tiny little hands. But for a lot of people, they're going to be one of the best options, especially if you have those giant hands, right? Those would be fantastic option for those people.
Well, they'd be great for all sort of grip strengths, as they say, got physics on their side. Yeah, but that's what I like. I mean, the rotate from a pulling and shoving through perspective gives you a lot of physics on your side if you have a hand size that's conducive to it. I think they're really cool. Honestly, we've got 3 pairs here, and I'm thinking about getting a 4th because I just don't like shuttling them around from one side to the other. Would love a black on black pair, but they're really great. So I would definitely recommend checking out the Prime rotate handles.
I have something else I want to ask you.
Yeah.
So we're talking about pulling right now, and this is like this very neutral, almost anatomical neutral position when we're pulling. You can't see it if you're listening, but I've got my hands facing each other, thinking about them doing like a traditional pull, and I'm thinking about pull-ups. And I know when people discuss pull-ups, these typically as trainers of fitness people, we talk about pull-ups training different muscles based on our palms facing out, our palms facing in, our palms facing close to each other, how wide are we having our hands relative to the center of our body. And just based on what you've been saying right now, Brandon, I'm starting to piece it together, is that, if we're kind of deviating either fully rotated in, like full supination, or full pronation, that's going to change the link tension relationship of a lot of these muscles and the congruency of these joints, and either be stronger in some places and weaker in others. Is that right?
100%. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I think the notion of a pull-up, like changing just where your hand position is, palms facing is for X, and palms facing is for X, and palm in is for X. It's just not fair, and it's just not accurate. And in fact, if you are training different muscles, it certainly is not the upper back muscles. I mean, I think there are some people who would argue that changing your angle to your body could hit different divisions of shoulder extensors and lat. Sure, we can have that conversation at another time, but changing your hand position, it does not. But it could bias different wrist and hand muscles. But ironically, no one is doing pull-ups to get different wrist and hand development. It comes back to the grip strength thing, where you could train grip in a lot of different positions, because we've got a huge continuum of approximation, pronation and supination and radial ulnar approximation and deviation that you can go through. Again, those are all cool things, but what are you doing them for? I mean, as a drummer, there's certain things I like to do that wouldn't benefit you, but you as a jiu-jitsu person holding on to gis or whatever you're holding on to, totally different than what I'm doing. So, a grip for every trip is why I like the name of this here. But 100%, I mean, this is where if you look at a deadlifter, you'll see a deadlifter who's picking up hundreds of pounds. They got one hand up and one hand down. Now, technically, one hand being fully pronated and one hand being fully supinated. Got that backwards. But in any event, this avoids the rolling out, because if you have both palms down or both palms up, first and foremost, you're in an extreme position of supination or pronation. Second, you have this opportunity where if that bar starts rolling, it's going to try and roll open your fingers. So having one hand up and one hand down takes away the rollaway factor and gives you a little bit more, back to the rotate handles, physics on your side. But this is where if you have a neutral grip, palms facing, like most trap bars have this actually all trap bars have this neutral grip, you are stronger for two reasons. One, you take away the rollaway factor. You still have a symmetrical grip, relatively speaking, opposite symmetrical, but you take away the rollaway factor, and you also have your hands in an optimal position, in the mid position of most grip strength muscles. So you don't have a pronation, supination variable inhibiting or shortening some of those muscles. So when you close your hand, the only approximation you're getting of shortening muscles is from the hand size, not from here or here. So it's a super great point, which leads into, which we won't be talking about today, the same thing with bench press. I mean, barbell bench press is like, one of the big bad three, which I think is silly to have those labeled as such, because they're brilliant exercises, but they have restrictions. And what does bench press do? Full pronation and shoving you into radial deviation. How many people have wrist problems that bench press?
Well, straight bar bicep curls versus using the bent easy bar to put your hands in a bit more of a favorable position so that your joints can contract and be congruent. Absolutely. That's a huge one. And you see that all the time. People just straight bar and just being like, I remember being younger, just being like, I guess this is supposed to be kind of weird on my wrist, like no pain, no gain. And then you try with the easy bar for the first time, and it's like the light from heavens open up and it shines down on you, and you hear all that music. It's a totally different experience.
Totally.
But we have it like in the exercise world that X, Y, and Z exercises are supposed to be done in these positions like this. If you want to grow the long head versus the short head of the bicep, like that really even matters that much. If you're like a general population person just trying to add some muscle, and if you don't do it this way, you're not going to have the best workout. And everybody I know who is now a fitness and health professional who's been in the field for at least 15, 20 years, like yourself or like me, who's been exercising for about that long, I've got issues in my body that probably aren't going to go away because of lifting incorrectly. And I don't mean incorrectly like I didn't brace properly. I mean doing exercises that violated my joint positions at my wrists, at my elbows, at my back, that have done some damage, that are just I have to mitigate it the best that I can for the rest of my life.
To be honest, most of my injuries that I have in my wrist and hands are 100% from doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was younger, I was on a bench press goal of bench pressing 3 plates. I got it to 335, rad. I have these ganglion cysts in the back of my wrist from jamming back into wrist extension. Yeah. Brutal. Yeah. I was into Olympic lifting. I did a lot of it, a lot of clean and jerks, right? What does that do? Full pronation and full wrist extension with all that weight smashing down on you. Same thing, smashing into end range. My wrists are bad. And that sucks because now those wrist injuries inhibit my ability to do other things that I love, drums and stuff like that. So this is where I talk about exercising pain-free. At that time, I was feeling pain when I was doing those exercises, and I still have got some problems from it, but now I've learned from them. And honestly, this is where I love prime trap bars. I love them. This is where when I can, I want to get a Kabuki Cadillac bar, which has got like it's a bench press bar with the palms facing in. I think that's great. All those are great options. And so this is the nice thing. Like you said with the easy curl bar, lots of bodybuilders back in the day intuitively figured it out from how it felt. Now there are smarter people who are actually figuring things out. And I think that's great because there's lots of really cool designs. You said something about short head and a long head bicep in the hand position. There's a couple people I know who are doing some interesting research with Moxie and EMG, suggesting that you can focus on different divisions of muscles, which I don't understand entirely yet, which I'm interested in learning. But I will say this, it really doesn't have to do anything with the hand position. It has to do with the orientation of the origin insertion and directions of the joint relative to those muscles. But this thing down here, it will change some things, but not muscles like biceps in most cases. A little bit, actually, that's not fair to say, but not enough that you're going to get a totally different hypertrophy response with different hand grips. It's just going to feel better.
Yeah, you have to really appreciate your joints, and your hand and your wrist joint are these kind of joints where you don't really feel the closed pack positions as much, right? So when you go into full knee extension, you can feel that terminal lockout. The same thing with like elbow extension. You've hit those terminal positions. When you are playing around with your wrist and hand, I mean, these things are meant to be able to take some passive tension. I mean, that's what they're built for, they're designed for, but that doesn't mean that we should be trying to do that with them all the time. And we should still be adhering to ranges of motion the body can control and exploring them as we can. And, there are times when we both prescribed exercise to people. We're trying to have them try to explore those ranges of motion just because you have a range of motion doesn't mean you explore it under tension all the time the way you ought to. I mean, we think that we really explore joint end range positions throughout our day. Like, we probably don't. Like, I don't really think I experience like end range hip position extension every day, or full hip flexion, or full trunk flexion. Like, we don't really do that as much in our lives as we think. And to be able to experience that under control with resistance for an hour, a few times a week in the gym goes a long way to joint health, longevity, and just feeling good and be able to do all the stuff that you want to with a high quality of life.
Yeah, I think if you guys want to feel something, I have an experiment that you can try. And I did this in the study group and I threw it out there, right? So like Glenn's saying, your joint range of motion and your muscles' ability to control those motions are two different things. And in some scenarios, you can mix up the modes of contraction and all of a sudden lose the ability to actively go into a range. So try this with me, and there's a visual that goes with it, but I'll describe it more so. What I want you to do is put your arms at your side and elbow at 90 degrees. Take your palm and turn your palm all the way down into full pronation. From there, bring your palm down towards your knee and then try to curl your fingers without losing the wrist position. And you'll feel that things start to tighten up in your forearm a lot. Now, if you do the same thing, and we're going to reverse it now. So close your fingers, bring your palm towards your forearm, and then try and turn in, right? Ultimately, we're getting to the same finger flexed, wrist flexed, and pronated position of the arm, but both feel entirely different and are restricted by the muscle's ability to get to shortened positions, right? Because you have multiple muscles that cross the fingers, the wrist, and the hand. So just play with that, and you can try all these different things, and you'll feel totally different scenarios. Some are appropriate, some may not. But all that's starting to show you is that how you get into a range will dictate how much range of motion you have, which kind of comes back to the hip extension, external rotation thing you sent me, which I think is a great example. I got one more grip thing.
Sure.
CAS handles.
CAS handles, talk about it.
Cassim Hansen from N1 Education created these cool metal handles that are cone shaped, and they're smaller on the thumb side and taper out to the pinky finger side. For shoving, they're really cool because when you're doing a barbell bench press, like a straight bar, the bar, if you have your palms in the normal, fully pronated position, will shove you more into radial deviation. You are great. Ulna, radius, great, right? It'll shove you more into radial deviation and can cause some unpleasant forces. Well, his really nice big taper code handles fit into the thumb and are bigger on the pinky finger side. So if you're doing a press, it actually fits in the hand ergonomics for shoving things really well. So like chest flies, chest presses, shoulder presses, I love them. But they're a perfect example of a grip for that trip specifically. Because if you try to use them for pulling things, the ergonomics on the pinky finger side of it, really not favorable because it's really wide at one end with fingers that are getting smaller. So for pulling and rowing exercises, your grip strength is going to be at a huge disadvantage if your goal is to move heavy weight with larger muscles. However, grip strength stuff, if you want to improve your grip strength, could be a really sneaky way to improve your grip strength. I like them a lot. Again, they're a grip for every trip.
Yeah, play around. I mean, when you're doing an exercise, you will know by being aware whether something feels good or not. I mean, try doing a straight bar bicep curl with your elbows to your sides and your arms straight out in front of you, just like so. I guess if you can't see, my palms are just straight out in front of me. And try doing a curl and see how it feels, versus trying to do that same exercise and letting your elbows hang wherever they want to, holding the curls, the bent part on the easy bar, and then try doing your bicep curls. And you'll feel a totally different experience. One will feel icky on the joint. One will feel really, really good. So listen to your body when you're doing these exercises, because it will tell you whether it's comfortable for you or not. And if a grip is something that's limiting you in your exercises. If you got a pair of rotate handles, try them out. Try some different grip sizes. If you got smaller hands, a thinner grip is going to be better. Whether it's called a women's bar, a men's bar, who cares? It's just a label somebody gave a bar. Use implements that are going to make you feel good, help you get to your goals. And if grip strength is truly limiting thing, try Brandon's run the rack, hold the weights for time, try different weights next workout that are a little bit heavier. Keep track of whether you're doing 60 seconds or 40 seconds and try to improve that a little bit, and your grip will get better. And it's really, really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated.
No, I love it, Glenn. You wrap this up really perfectly well. I think, honestly, if you're finding that your grip strength is stopping you from performing with another exercise, don't be afraid of trying some implements. I think straps are fantastic, but I don't want anyone to become dependent on them because there's a whole other stability issue that pops up. So do what you got to do to get the adaptations that you need and you want for your goal. Glenn, what the heck is your pick of the week?
So, shameless plug for Strata. We have study groups here every week. The Strata Biomechanics Study Group. I learn a lot from them. Brandon runs them, and I don't know. Can people join them? I forget.
Yep. So if you're a personal trainer who's interested in joining them, it is a community. It is a service. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me on Instagram. You can either find me at Strata Internal Performance or brandon.green.fitnesspro. I'm happy to talk to you guys about them, but you're too kind for pumping this up.
So here's the thing is the study groups are really well catered to people from all different walks of fitness and health. We have people who've been in the industry for 10 years. We have people who are just entering the industry now, and everybody always walks away with something new and improved knowledge every study group. And that, I think, is one of the things that is a hallmark of a great learning experience, is that even if you've got a whole bunch of knowledge already and you feel comfortable and confident, you walk away with something where you're like, I didn't know that. And you feel like a better professional for going through that experience. And so if you're listening to this and you are the kind of person that likes to learn, and you've read all these different books and you've tried all these different courses, and a lot of the stuff seems repetitive, I highly recommend reaching out to Brandon at the credentials that he gave you, the information that he gave you, and try it out, because I feel like you will move forward as a fitness professional 10x faster. We've got all kinds of study groups. I know it's a shameless plug, but it's so true. Brandon's not paying for me for this, by the way. I get no kickbacks. Study groups for building your business, study groups for building your repertoire of knowledge. It's really best of both worlds. So my pick of the week are the Strata Biomechanics study groups.
Well, thank you so much. That's super, super kind of you. Ultimately, I'm just trying to keep the conversation going. So wherever you are in your learning curriculum, I'm just trying to take the information you may have learned from personal training school, RTS, the muscle specialist course, wherever you are, and just keeping the conversation going and keeping people studying and learning. So thanks so much, man. That's kind of you.
You're welcome. Brandon, what is your pick of the week, my friend?
This is a follow-up from last week's story I told about the pick of the week, and it is a USB-C audio interface. I got this PreSonus one in the mail based off of the conversation we talked about last week, and I plugged it in, and I got an audio mic, and it is awesome. It connects right into everything that I use. In fact, I'm potentially, when I can afford it, thinking about getting a second small one for this show to keep it right here, because I plug it in, it connects right into Zoom, and it's helped me streamline all my social media content. I got some really cool stuff coming out because we got the Canon camera hooked up, because the Canon Connect, thanks to Glenn making that pop up, help us know about that Canon utility, and now I got Pro Audio coming through the camera, through Zoom. It's just insane. So I'm going to say, look at getting a Scarlett or PreSonus USB-C interface. They are not super, super cheap, but you can get a small one for $200 or $300 that makes your audio quality super high, streamline the process. And as Glenn and I get deeper into this, there's going to be even better stuff with this show. So check it out.
Fantastic. Ladies and gents, Strata Internal Performance is a new market. We are on Leslie, just north of Davis Drive. We are open right now, following all the safety and health protocols. So if you want to come and you're looking for a fitness or health professional, we'd love to see you. We do offer free consultations and all that fun stuff. We would love to have more of our listeners come in and see us. Things are a little bit dicey right now because we just opened up, but as the lockdown restrictions start being lifted, we will let you know, and we'd love for you to swing by. Brandon, online, where are we at?
www.stratainternalperformance.com. You can find out more cool stuff on Strata, on Instagram. You can also follow us, Minds on Muscle Podcast on Instagram. Glenn does a great job editing these awesome shorts with concise bits from each episode. Check it out, everyone. Everyone, we want you exercising pain-free. If you like this episode, please share it. Please give us 5 stars. We'd love to reach out to more people. We're excited to do this. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, and if you want to watch this, it's on YouTube, and you can listen to it on Podbean, Spotify, and iTunes, all the fun listening platforms. Everybody, this has been a really fun episode. We love talking about stuff that's a little bit more nuanced, and exercise and grip strength is definitely one of the things that requires that kind of attention. So everyone, have a wonderful day.
Bye, everybody.